Good afternoon. I'm Madush Gupta, Policy Lead for Innovation and Technology at the City of London Corporation and Board Advisor to the amazing Innovate Finance. I'm also an NED at the Centre for Finance, Innovation and Technology, and in my day job, I actually have a day job, I'm an Innovation Leader at Lloyds Banking Group. It's a pleasure and an honour to welcome you to this discussion on authorised push payment fraud data held in these historic crypts in Guildhall. As we stand at the crossroads of tradition and innovation, here in the heart of the City of London, it's important to remember the city has always been a hub of evolution, blending the old with the new. The very essence of this gathering, leveraging cutting-edge synthetic data to combat APP fraud, is a testament to the spirit of transformation. The City Corporation was proud to act as co-secretariat of the Khalifa Review of UK FinTech. Among many proposals in the review, there was a recommendation to create a new permanent digital sandbox to encourage collaboration. I was delighted to see the FCA take this forward. In 2022, the FCA and the City Corporation collaborated to deliver a time-boxed digital sandbox to drive innovation at the proof of concept stage for sustainably focused tech solutions. This synthetic dataset will be hosted on the now permanent digital sandbox. The Khalifa Review recommended that a sandbox should focus on priority fintech areas. It should allow fintech collaboration, access to synthetic datasets, and deployment to open source. And crucially, as Sir Ron called out, hosted by the FCA. It's a great step forward for fintech that this recommendation has been achieved. The FCA has extensive experience convening the financial services industry to help solve industry-wide problems via the Tech Sprint program and other initiatives. When the FCA and the PSR convened APP Fraud Tech Sprint in 2022, we took an important step forward in our collective mission against financial fraud. Synthetic datasets drive technological innovation and cross-sector collaboration to create shared solutions to common problems. Yet, the staggering losses of APP fraud continue at £485 million last year. Our journey is far from over. Fast-evolving fraudsters demand agility, foresight, and collaborative innovation. Today's event is yet another step in our ongoing pursuit. It is an opportunity to harness the collective intelligence and resources of this community. I wish to commend the efforts of the FCA, my City of London colleagues, and of the Smart Data Foundry. Their tireless work has brought us all here, further bridging the gap between potential and implementation. We'll delve deeper into synthetic data's potential, driving understanding and ideation. Beyond the datasets and the technology, let's recognize the importance of human collaboration. Our combined knowledge, expertise, and commitment form the bedrock upon which our technological advances will rest. If you would like to act as a mentor to firms participating in the sprint, please do reach out to the corporation or the FCA, or indeed myself. Thank you all for being here this afternoon, for committing to this journey of innovation, and for playing a pivotal role in sculpting a safer, more secure financial landscape for all. Let us reconvene, share ideas together, propel our community to new heights. Thank you very, very much for listening to me. I am delighted to welcome to the stage John Williams, an APP fraud at the PSR, and he spent his career investigating fraud and payments before that at Experian. Welcome to the stage.
push payment fraud or APP fraud. And sorry, my apologies. I'm hoping I haven't broken the microphone. Can you hear me now? Let me go to the podium. Sorry. Can you hear me now? So I'm Jonathan Williams. I work for the Payment Systems Regulator. I've been working for them for the last 3 years, and since the tech sprint back in September 2022, I've been working primarily on the APP scams work that the PSR has been doing. So when we talk about authorized push payment fraud, APP fraud, we typically conjure up a very simple image of it, where we have on one side a victim with their bank, their payment service provider. On the other side, we have another payment service provider and the account of the fraudster. It's very simple picture. In reality, we all know that that's a very simplistic view of the way that things work. On this side, we tend to end up with mule networks, so a transaction may bounce through several different accounts before eventually being cashed out by the fraudster. And on this side, how the consumer, how the individual, how the business is persuaded to make that payment can be very, very complicated. There are romance scams, there are purchase scams, there are all sorts of different types of ways that fraudsters, criminals are able to go and persuade people to part with their money. In some cases, they are persuaded to be investing in things, in some cases purchasing, in some cases it's a transaction to rescue somebody from a hostage situation. Fraudsters are very creative. In fact, if we were to look at it, if we were to look at the innovation in payments over the last 15 years, I think one of the good competitive candidates is looking at what criminals have done to persuade people to part from their money. If you're looking for innovation, they are tremendously innovative. They evolve their techniques. They're very good at it. So, on the one side, we have very creative fraudsters. On the other side, we have a complicated network of money mules, a complicated network of systems to move that money out. Very complicated. How do we tackle it? Well, I think the important thing to realize is that we all need to be aligned to fight it. And as Chris Hemsley has said in a number of speeches recently, we need to ensure that the incentives exist all the way across the payments industry to work together to be able to fight fraud, to prevent it, to detect it, to repatriate funds, to remediate customers. All of those things need to happen. Our primary goal as the payment systems regulator is to prevent fraud. Where that can't be prevented, then customers need to be refunded where they are genuine victims of APP fraud. That's what our policy statement says, which we published in June last year and clarified in December last year, with a number of updates, including the go-live date, which is the 7th of October this year. So if you're a payment service provider in the audience and that is news to you, then do reach out to certainly Pay.UK under the faster payments rules, but also if you have specific questions, visit our website, because there's a lot of clarification, a lot of information, and of course the legal instruments that we are using to enforce that behavior. So we at the PSR are very focused on trying to solve that particular problem. We realize that payment service providers can do a lot more than they currently do. Sending firms can engage their customers in trying to prevent those transactions happening in the first place. They can try and spot where some of their customers are being manipulated into making payments which aren't in their interest. Making payments, for example, to their private school when it's not their private school, it's actually a fraudster or the fraudster's mule account. So sending firms can do a lot to help, but receiving firms can also do a lot to try and help understand this. And one of the key things that we are doing as the payment systems regulator under the faster payments rule changes that we're putting in place through Pay.UK is to ensure that receiving firms are informed when there is a claim, when there's a claim of APP fraud made by the sending customer over this site. One of the problems is that at the moment, not every payment service provider is told when they've received a fraud, so they don't know that one of the accounts they hold may be receiving the proceeds of crime, and therefore they can't do anything about it. We are keen to make sure that that is addressed, and that's what we put in our policy and in our legal instruments. But we've also got a number of other elements to trying to fight this, and we are only one jigsaw piece in the whole anti-fraud jigsaw. So we can contribute what we can contribute, but there are other parties, other organizations that contribute to the national fraud strategy to try and drive out APP fraud and all sorts of other criminal activity too. So some of the things that we're doing, we're increasing the confirmation of payee usage across a number of payment service providers. So there'll be, by October, of the order of about 400 or so payment service providers who will be able to confirm the name on the accounts that are receiving payments. So that will help drive out some aspects of APP fraud. We are also encouraging the industry to work on data sharing initiatives, such as the Enhanced Fraud Data Initiative from Pay UK, but there are also a number of other things that can be used to help too. And we've also introduced the reimbursement mechanism within the faster payment system. But last October, we also published statistics on which firms are reimbursing customers, but also which firms are experiencing most losses, most sent APP frauds, and the most received APP frauds. And that helps give industry some sort of benchmark as to where each payment service provider sits on that vast spectrum of propensity to pay or propensity to accept APP fraud. So it gives firms an opportunity to go and try and work that out. We're very keen that the industry works together, that collaborates, sending firms and receiving firms alongside the clearinghouse, so the operator of the payment system, Pay UK, to ensure that we get good outcomes for consumers, we get good outcomes for the industry, we get bad outcomes for criminals and those fraudsters who are attempting to use our payment systems to take advantage of individuals or businesses. And we're very keen to ensure that those incentives exist, and that's one of the reasons why our policy, which shares the liability for those APP fraud losses, ensures that both sending and receiving firms are incentivized to do what they can to prevent fraud right up front. Some of the things that they may be doing, some of the tools they may be using will rely on data. They'll rely on data in terms of the sending accounts, the receiving accounts, being able to exchange information, being able to spot patterns of fraud. And one of the key things to be able to go and test out those tools, those solutions to the APP fraud problem, those component parts in the overall solution that a payment service provider puts in place to protect their customers. One of the important things to be able to do is to be able to go and test those solutions with real data, realistic data. And that's one of the things which we are very keen to go and do when we built up the tech sprint back in 2022. And I'm delighted that the FCA and the Smart Data Foundry have taken that forward with a synthetic data set which can be used to test these tools to give payment service providers real information, real indicative information of how those products perform in a real environment. So delighted to be here to introduce APP fraud. If anyone has any questions about it later, do feel free to go and call me. But I'm delighted to be able to hand across to Mary Kyle, who'll be introducing the panel and talking about what can be done. Thank you.
Madush, for your opening comments. And afternoon, everyone. We look like some sort of dysfunctional pop band, so bear with us. My name is Mary Kyle. I am Head of Financial and Professional Services Technology at the corporation. It's not the snappiest of titles, but what we're really focused on in the tech team is helping financial services and the tech sectors work together to get solutions to market more quickly that can help UK FPS remain competitive. I was actually very honoured to be part of the team that launched the original digital sandbox pilot back in 2020. And it remains probably my favourite project I've ever worked on. So I'm very happy as well that we're still working with the FCA and Smart Data Foundry on this app fraud project. To just provide a little bit of extra context to the project, it has two main aims. The first is to really help accelerate the development of solutions to combat app fraud. And the interlinking second aim is to sort of expand the use of synthetic data. We've been using synthetic data relating to fraud on the sandbox since 2020, but we're also conscious that it has its limitations. That's why we're spending this year trying to build out a really strong data set that we think can really help boost innovation and accelerate development in this area. Now, I am going to ask each of my panel members to introduce themselves, and we're also going to open up this session to Q&A later on. I haven't seen any of the other sessions do this. I don't know whether that means we're destined to fail, but just to give you a little bit more of an understanding of each of the panel members, I'd like you to just introduce yourselves and explain a bit about what your day-to-day role in your organization entails. Matt, I've known you the longest, so I'm going to pick on you first.
Thank you, and thanks for the kind introduction. Permanent Digital Sandbox, I think, or Digital Sandbox, what we do with Sydney United Corporation is also my favourite project, so that's nice. So I'm Matt Lowe. I'm the manager of the Innovation Lab at the FCA, and that sits within a bigger department called Innovation. We do a lot of, sorry, can you hear me? Good, all right. Do I have to start again? All right, good, okay. I don't know if I can remember my name again. Anyway, so I'm Matt Lowe, Innovation Lab Manager. We sit within the broader innovation department, and we do a lot of things. We have our innovation services which cover our Reg Sandbox and Innovation Pathways, which is like our original innovation offering. We also have an MTech and research team who look at like what's happening, at least horizon scanning, and looking at new technologies and how they might impact the financial services sector, and they do a lot of interesting stuff on quantum computing. We also have a RegTech and SubTech team that analyses the RegTech market and SubTech market to understand what's happening and get an idea about what our stakeholders are doing with RegTech and SubTech. And we also have a global innovation team, which is covering more of that international engagement, where we can help influence, I guess, bigger changes that are happening internationally. Then there's my team, and my team is Innovation Lab, and I've heard Tech Sprint dropped about 3 or 4 times already, and you're probably all wondering, what is a Tech Sprint? A Tech Sprint is a regulatory hackathon, and our team is responsible for running those as well. Essentially what we try to do is we try to bring together the best and the brightest people to work on use cases or problems we want to solve and get them to do that over a period of time. We've been experimenting with that model. We have, historically, we've done 2 to 3 day in-person tech sprints. The app fraud tech sprint was one of those. We have great convening power at the FCA, so it's quite easy to get that sort of engagement. And the idea is they come up with some solutions as a result. So I've been doing that since about 2018, actually. I've done about 14 tech sprints, so I'm now a veteran, I think. I've probably done the most tech sprints that's ever been done in the world, so maybe I'll get some sort of medal at the end of this. But essentially, there's that part of my team, and we also have the Digital Sandbox offering, which kind of came out of the tech sprint model in a way. One of my frustrations with doing tech sprints was that I would go around and I'd get all the architecture and the data. We'd do the events, and then I'd decommission everything, and we'd lose access to all of that good work and the collateral that we'd built up through the tech sprint itself. So the Digital Sandbox is there to help provide a more permanent model, so we can have a tech sprint, we can focus on that fraud, and then we can actually make some of those assets more widely available in the permanent Digital Sandbox if anybody's going to continue development. And that's what I call the long tail of innovation, where we might see something spark where we weren't expecting it. And so we're starting to see some of that come through now. Anyway, I just spoke for about probably 20 minutes, and that was a bit of a diatribe, but hello, welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Paul Shanks. I'm a fraud strategy manager at NatWest. Been in the fraud space, that's prevention, for about 14 to 15 years. In that time, have worked various roles around. I remember when I first started, when I left school, I was looking at checks, crediting our customers' accounts and assessing if they were indeed fraud or if they were genuine, working my way all the way up to implementing some of the best tools in the market to prevent real-time digital transactions from falling to go into the hands of fraudsters. And most kind of recently, I guess, getting involved in some model development builds as well. So making sure my subject matter expert, all my experience is going into that. So we're building the features that allow us to identify those payments and obviously not hindering the genuine customer too much. It was a joy to get involved in the synthetic data set. I've been quite hands-on with it. Be presenting next week as well, a bit of a plug there, at the Spring Expo. Look forward to sharing some of those things with you, A today and B next week as well. So pleasure meeting you all.
Great, thank you. My name is Kathy Gormley. I'm a product manager at ResistantAI. We are a machine learning company. We support financial institutions to strengthen their controls against fraud and money laundering through a machine learning based capability. My day-to-day quite varied. So a lot of focus relevant to this panel, of course, is helping firms prepare for the upcoming PSR deadline. So strengthening their both inbound and outbound controls with our real-time detection, and also looking ahead. So fraudsters constantly innovating, so looking at how we keep pace and look at what is next and make sure that our customers are on top of things. We'll also be presenting at the FCA event next week, some of our developments on the sandbox, so very excited about that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. My name is David Tracy. I'm Head of Data Products at Smart Data Foundry. Smart Data Foundry is a not-for-profit spin-out from the University of Edinburgh. We've got two main missions. One is to promote fintech innovation, and the other is to promote, I guess, the use of privately held data for public good. So helping, working with big organisations to use their data to inform government regulators about what's happening in the real world. My job there as Head of Data Product is to run our synthetic data platform, ISO. I guess day to day, what I do, I talk to organisations, tiny organisations to massive ones, from fintechs that are starting up to scaling up, to global banks who might need to use synthetic data for innovation. We also work with regulators like the FCA and PSR. And other maybe kind of like government organisations as well who might want to use synthetic data. We're really proud to have contributed data to the City of London FCA sandbox for this. We've also worked with FinTech Scotland on data for small business banking innovation there, and we're working with the Department of Business and Trade on their Smart Data Challenge, which will be a synthetic data sandbox that brings together banking data, energy data, insurance, what else? Retail, home, lots of different things. So really excited to be at this kind of cutting edge of like using data to explore really and drive forward innovation in these kind of like really rich data spaces, which would be impossible with real data a lot of the time.
Brilliant. Thank you, panel, and hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of why they're all here today and how they're involved in the project. Now, we've already heard some of the figures about app fraud, which have remained shocking and worsening. City of London, we have a massive interest in combating this because it's a huge part of keeping UK financial services competitive. As an individual, I've done it. I've filled in that text message which told me my parcel had been delivered somewhere else. And so something that we're all interested in. But Matt, as the FCA, what is it about this project in particular that's sort of driving your interest or that you want to get out of it?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I think, we've seen the stats, or we've heard them today, and it's like app fraud is obviously one of the things that is a bit of a priority for the FCA. When we look at our priorities, fraud is always one of those ones that keeps on coming up, and it will continue to as well, because we know fraud isn't going to go away. It's funny enough, I was out on Friday night and a friend got scammed whilst we're out, and it happens to, I think, all of us when we talk about app fraud.
Thank you, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's going to happen to me one day as well. It's probably not. It's an if, it's a when, isn't it? So you've always got to remain vigilant, and I think probably everybody in this room either knows somebody or has been scammed at some point in time. So it's really important for us to think about how we protect consumers as an as a financial regulator. I guess we talked about a tech sprint, and there's a bit of background to that journey where we partnered up with the PSR, and our journey from there has been okay, we've done the tech sprint, we did a 3-day event, we saw some really good solutions come out of it. In fact, I know at least one or two where they've gone on to develop them a bit further, and they've created a muling type of solution, which is now being commercialized, and we're seeing some promising things come off the back of the tech sprint. When we talked about our synthetic data journey, if you don't know about synthetic data, it's one of the good things about synthetic data is it's safe, and it's safe to share. So it's GDPR compliant, which means that we can develop solutions off the back of it, where we don't have any of those data privacy issues that you might have with real data. Obviously, real data is always going to be better than synthetic data. I think we can all agree to that. But when it comes to that solution development and you're trying to get those early ideas off the ground, it's not always possible to get access to that data, especially if you're an early stage innovator where you're just starting on your journey. You might have a good idea, but if you start engaging with a bank who might have the data, it's going to be a long sort of onboarding process before you get access to it. So the idea behind giving access to synthetic data in the digital sandbox is that we can start lighting some of those fires and we can get those solutions going. And then the idea is that we start to see some of those solutions where they go from proof of concept to proof of value, and we start seeing them engage with other organizations where they can take it further, and they've shown that they've been able to develop something within the digital sandbox. So that's kind of where we're at now. The permanent digital sandbox is open to anybody to apply, within reason. Obviously, we don't want bad actors in there. But essentially what we do is we open the digital sandbox up with those assets, and we've already alluded to next week, we are going to start seeing some of the solutions that have gone through the permanent digital sandbox and what they've done on that front. So, great. Smart Data Foundry gave us a data set. We have something where we can start to develop and we can see some of the solutions that come out. We've got enough time where people have been working with that data, and now we start to understand, okay, well, what are some of the limitations to synthetic data, to Mary's point before, but also what are some of those solutions and what do they look like? And I don't want to steal any of David's thunder because I know he's got a lot to say about the data itself, but I mean, it's a data set where you wouldn't get it in the real world. Like, you usually don't get to see, 4 different banks, the transactions among those banks and the telco sector as well, and how there's like this relationship between that. Like, when someone is defrauded, they might start with a phone call, and then you might see the patterns of behavior when it comes to muling, and all of that sits within a data set. But I'm not going to talk to that because that's probably stealing a bit of David's thunder. So that's kind of what we're seeing within that data set. I will do my shameless plug at the end as well to invite you to the expo next week. So I'm going to hold fire on that. But that's been our journey so far.
Yes, and that's your cue to pass the microphone to David. Lovely. David, the synthetic data set, to the extent it's possible, can you provide everyone here with an overview of what's in it and sort of why it's relevant and helpful to app fraud?
Sure. So maybe just talk a little bit about what synthetic data is, as I don't think we've really kind of covered that. What's the difference between that and real-world data? I guess real-world data contains information about real people or real companies or real things or objects like your car or your house or your energy or something like that. And synthetic data is kind of the same, except some or all of the people, the events that happen, the interactions between the people and the businesses might be artificial. So we've pioneered a couple of different ways to generate the synthetic data in ways which are safe, that doesn't use real data as a seed, so that we can be absolutely sure that, as Matt was saying, it was completely safe to use. There's no GDPR, there's no risk around kind of like reverse engineering the real people or businesses that might have provided data that you've then turned into synthetic data. For this sandbox, we've created, I guess, as Matt alluded to, data about the banking of 20,000 people. That's maybe kind of like, and those people have relationships within the group as well. So you might see families, you might see friends, you might see other kind of like social networking kind of behaviours in there. We've also coupled that with telecommunications data about those people as well. So we can see metadata about the phone calls that they make, the text messages they send to each other. We've also put some businesses that they interact with in there. So for instance, in the bank transactions, you'll see people go into a synthetic version of Tesco and doing their shopping, or going to Shell and filling up their synthetic car or whatever they're doing with that. And then in amongst all of that, we've also put in a few hundred baddies in the data as well, whose job is to, I guess, kind of infiltrate those financial networks that people might have, persuade them that there's some good reason to send them money, according to 5 different what we call fraud typologies. So those are around kind of like impersonation or fake goods or sort of advance payments, which I think, Mary, you were alluding to, that delivery that never actually was missed and so on. And then seeing what happens when all of those people interact.
fact, the data runs for a timeline of 2 years. So there's a really rich, I guess, kind of like diverse set of things that are just happening in the data. You see all the behaviours that you would expect people and businesses maybe to do day to day. You know, they commute, they get paid a salary, they pay their bills, they buy their shopping and so on. But then every now and then there might be something a bit funny, something a bit unexpected or kind of unexplained in there, and I guess that presents a challenge for the innovators in the sandbox to go and try and solve what's happening there. There was a point Matt made. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree that real data is always better than synthetic data. Real data comes with problems and baggage. We all know the GDPR, the safety risk, all the rest of it. Particularly in an arena like fraud, though, where sometimes not all fraud is reported. You know, people for whatever reason might not realise that they've been victims of fraud in the first place, or they feel ashamed or embarrassed to report the fraud. And so ground truth can be really difficult to establish in the real world for fraud. But because we generate all the data from the ground up, there's no ambiguity, there's no doubt about whether or not that was a real or a fake fraud event. And so then that allows people to build their models in a kind of like a known and very certain kind of like data environment, which can that ambiguity of the real world can sometimes get in the way of innovation as well, where you just don't have confidence in the data sometimes. So.
It's great to have controversy on a panel. My job as moderator is complete. And we also have a volunteer to start the silent disco later, for which I'm very appreciative. Kathy, that's the synthetic data in the abstract, but how have you used it in terms of developing your own solution on the sandbox?
Yeah, thank you. So, the data set, incredibly rich data set, and something that we would really find hard to have in real life, I think. So the data set has been fantastic for us for two primary reasons, I guess, for our kind of fraud solution development. One is access to data that represents multiple financial institutions, so having that cross-institution view. And two, having access to that telco data set, I think something that's been talked about a lot, but actually having that data. And for us, it allowed us to first assess what is the actual uplift we can achieve in fraud detection from looking cross-institution. So what is the value in having that visibility, and what does it actually mean to the detection of APP fraud? And that's what we're able to model using the synthetic data. And we're also able to look at it at various different layers. So what would it mean for us sending a bank to share a fraud label or potential fraud case, and what uplift would that provide? So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. What are the attributes and data points that could be shared safely within a real world environment? And it helped us to go through that exercise. So that was on the cross-institution data, and we have some cool results to show next week, another plug for the FCA event. So that's on the cross-institution data, which was incredibly rich. And then the second point was really on the telco data. So what is the power of bringing that telco data and combining it with the kind of traditional data sources that we would have had access to? And also looking at, it's a very large data set. What are the meaningful signals that we can see from that data? What actually provides uplift and value when we take that complex data set and distill it into something that could be operationalized and actually used in the real world? So those were kind of questions that the data set really helped us to understand and to answer, and then to be able to model that back into what impact is it actually having on the detection of APP fraud. So we've had a lot of fun with the data, in summary.
Excellent. Paul, coming on to you, same sort of question. How have you been using it? Is it the similar parts of the data set you've been using, or have you been doing anything different with it?
I think it's just refreshing to be reminded that synthetic data exists. It seems underutilized and undervalued a lot of the time, and it's got a real world kind of use case in the world of preventing fraud and scams. Fraudsters have no governance, we have lots of governance, so it's a really good opportunity to basically just generate lots of bad stuff, push it through our systems and test our risk thresholds, how our strategies and our tools, our systems, our models react, and kind of take learnings from that. Just touching on what's been said quite a lot as well, it's a really unique opportunity to look at either side of the payment as well. So obviously from a NatWest perspective, I know a lot about what our customers are doing, how they interact, what's normal for them. When that differs or veers too far from the norm, we can step in. But having additional intel on the beneficiary account, and before anything around the payment takes place, what's the telephony records like? Are they receiving calls, receiving text messages, and building up basically behavioral profiles around those different entities as well to help basically not only detect the bad stuff, but stop hindering and annoying our genuine customer base as well when we don't need to. So I'd say that's really good, and actually just bringing some of the live use cases. So actually looking at some of the scams within the data as well, and seeing how a scam kind of goes from a text message a couple of minutes before, leading up to a £35,000 chaps payment, for example, going out the door, which is one of the examples I found. It truly feels quite realistic. I don't think it's quite where it's not truly realistic as you'd imagine, but it's getting there, and it's giving us the ability to think outside the box and develop some new innovative strategies, not only within how we monitor and profile in real time within our fraud prevention tools, but also how we then potentially surface some insights within the customer journey at point of mandate creation or payment creation, and basically try and break the spell earlier. Much better to get in front of the payment before it actually takes place, rather than waiting for it to actually hit our system. So I think that's probably the main things for me.
Thank you, Paul. And you refer to the fact that the data set's getting better and better, which is one of the things we're really focused on as part of this project. How can we really push the limitations of synthetic data? And David, coming back to you, what are some of the key changes that you've made based on the feedback that you've had on the data over the past 6 months? I should have said we're halfway through the project, so this is very much an ongoing piece of work.
Yeah, we've actually just released our second update to the FCA, and I think it will be going to the participants next week. So, yeah, we've got another couple to come by the end of the year as well. In terms of the key things that we've put in, I think that one of the main things that we got asked about was confirmation of payee. We didn't have that in the data to start with, and that's obviously a really key mechanism for banks to kind of, like, as Paul was saying, break the spell. You know, like to challenge when a payment's been made and the name of the beneficiary isn't matching well enough to the name on the account, and so on. We've taken that on board from the participants and added that in, and now what you'll see is this intervention will happen, and it will stop some frauds in their tracks where people are challenged. But then we'll also find that, particularly with some of the impersonation frauds, that there is more likelihood that the objections will be overcome. And so, you know, if you've got a particularly I guess insidious type of kind of fraud, you like the bank impersonation, police impersonation, they're socially engineering the person through the phone call. Don't worry, you're going to get this message. You can ignore it. You know, you can trust me, etc., etc. Your money's under threat. That really urgent kind of call to action. We try to emulate that in the data by showing some of these payments going through, even though they should have been stopped by that. Other things we've added with sort of requests is more detail and I guess more accuracy around the kind of behaviours that people have. You know, we've added things like the transaction category, which is something that particularly banks or some fintechs will add, and that might add an extra, let's say, kind of like a feature for machine learning or other kind of like rule-based systems to intervene. We've got lots more on the roadmap. I think you know, things around kind of like how people's vulnerability to frauds might change over time. You know, depending whether they've been victims of fraud or not, or whether they're related to people that are, and maybe also we're trying to get our head around things like what happens after the fraud. You know, the mule account, the money laundering and so on, which I know is very popular from some of the participants. They're really keen to see that too.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. Thank you. I'm conscious that this can completely kill a session, but I'm also aware that I did offer Q&A at the beginning. So if anyone does have any questions they want to ask, please sort of wave at me. If not, I will continue with mine because I'm happy with them. Because my first one's going to be, we've very much focused this session around data for obvious reasons, but I'm interested to hear from you, Kathy, and Paul in particular, beyond the data, what is it that you as innovators in this area need to develop your solutions? What else would you like to see from the sandbox offering, or what else could assist you?
That's a really great question. I think I will say some of the data sets that, of course, David mentioned in terms of the muling and the later activity, I think will be incredibly valuable. But actually, I know something was mentioned earlier in terms of more mentors, so guidance from the community, right? We see the data. We're machine learning experts. We're looking at the data, but having individuals who are fighting this on the front line to help us with the development of our tools. So it takes a community, participants also from the telcos themselves. I think that would be something that would be really valuable to us, so we can bring the data to life. We of course can see the frauds and as Paul had said, the full kind of life cycle of the fraud, but having experts, people who are dealing with fraud in their day-to-day on the front line, come to the discussion would be really, really fantastic for vendors or solution providers like us to hear the insights direct. So that would be another thing in addition to the wider data set, looking at the other side of the transaction, so the actual muling activity, the subsequent layering. I think richer data on that would be really, really powerful.
Yeah, totally agree. I think also just making the data set look and feel a little bit more realistic as well. So it's all about that, getting that subject matter expert, all that knowledge from our agents that are sitting doing nothing but investigating fraud each day, getting all those clever things out of their brain and getting it kind of transposed some way or another into our synthetic data set, so that when we're producing products and services and innovative tools, then it's the data set that's the foundations of those tools are basically solid and they make sense, and it really is what it is like in the real world. I think that's probably the main one for me.
I'd like to say we do have a question. I think we're holding the mic, so the easiest way might be for you to shout it and I'll repeat it. It's very, very tech focused. Is that okay? Yes.
So it's a question for all the panel. We are a software company that develops fraud that analyzes company accounts, profit and loss balance and cash flow. And for our own purposes, we have developed our own synthetic data. And suddenly we have a portfolio of synthetic data of 7,000 companies through P&L balancing, cash flow, through COVID, recovery, etc. There's a lot of talk about fraud for persons. We do have an anomaly detection for company accounts where we've detected fraud. It's our purpose, but we have detected anomaly detection fraud in companies. And I was wondering how this data can be useful, not only, it's not what we do, but suddenly we have this synthetic data of 7,000 companies and we can produce more. I was wondering how this data could be useful to purposes like you're doing for fraud against people.
No, so that's
It's too long, but
but to summarize, and you'll try to remember, you've not by happenstance, but you've created your own huge set
For
of
our needs,
company
yeah.
synthetic data, and you're wondering how that can be useful for others.
exactly.
Sounds very altruistic and lovely.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we can monetize it as well.
But I mean, yes, I'm happy to open that to.
Can we have it?
Yeah, we can talk afterwards.
I have a digital sandbox, and we host data sets and APIs. So I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you after this. And yeah, if we can put on the digital sandbox, it is another offering out there that's, which can help. So yeah, absolutely. Let's have a conversation after this panel.
Do that first. But I think just in terms of the value, I think particularly with newer market participants, fintechs, earlier stage companies, they don't have a view of what normal activity looks like to be able to effectively fight fraud and identify, whether it's purchase scams and new businesses, etc. So they don't have a start point. So I think that data set is incredibly valuable to understand what does normal activity look like for these early stage businesses and their customers to help them with more effective fraud prevention. So I think, the sandbox is a good start, and then we can use the data to develop better solutions for fighting fraud.
There any other questions? I'm slightly blinded, but I don't think so. I was going to I'm conscious as well, we're ready to wrap up shortly. Matt, what are your aspirations for the sandbox? You've got a lot going on. You say you've got your tech sprints and everything else, and you now have the permanent digital sandbox. What are your aspirations for it in terms of, is it more data, more users, more sort of topics that you're covering? Where's it going to go from here?
Yeah, I've once described the digital sandbox is use case agnostic. So it essentially could tackle anything we really want to tackle, as long as we've got like some data sets, some APIs, and a willingness of a community and mentors who can help do that. So that was kind of always been my idea of where I'd want to take it. I want to be in a position where we can solve big problems, and that can obviously have to be within the FCA's remit, but it's a place to do that, right? And when it comes to what the future is, I imagine that over time we at least collect more data, and hopefully we've got some more today. But more data, more APIs, a bigger community. There are some constraints. I only have a team of so many people, so I can only let in so many people in the door, essentially play with the data. But saying that, if we start seeing promising results, then that might be something we can resource a bit more in the future. So we do have to manage that a little bit. I'm kind of always in a position where I'm like, well, do I want to go out and speak publicly about what we're doing? Because after I do that, I tend to get a lot more applications come through, and then I have to get my team to work on those cases, and then they kind of start complaining at me because they're overworked. So I kind of do need to balance out the messaging, but I'm doing a bit of a call out today. If anybody wants to come in, have a look at the digital sandbox, look at the assets that are on there, and if you see that there's anything that's of interest to you and you want to develop in it, then please apply. It's pretty straightforward, and it's free to explore.
I would encourage everyone to make Matt's life as difficult as possible. And definitely, in sort of wrapping up, as I mentioned just now, this is very much a halfway point for the project. We are keen to get more users in, at measured. And we're also keen to get more feedback on the data itself. So whether you're a tech company that's looking to develop solutions in this area, or you're a subject matter expert in terms of synthetic data or app fraud, or you're somebody who's interested in this topic and might be wanting to give some of that mentorship we've talked about this afternoon to some of the teams that are coming through, or you just want to go and have a look, please do go to the Digital Sandbox website. If you can't find that, reach out to any of us on the panel. We'd be very happy to guide you. The Showcase Expo at the FCA next Thursday. Please do come and attend. Do you want to say a couple more words? Oh, he's getting his phone out.
The team's going to kill me if I don't say a few other things I need to plug. So we did talk a lot about the Showcase. So that is happening next Thursday. That is also free to register for. It's at the FCA offices in Stratford. I have also got on the 22nd of April, which is Monday, for anybody that might be working on market abuse, we have a market abuse tech sprint, which is a cohort model. Applications close on Monday, so if that is of interest to you, it's really actually rich data set of markets data that has been provided by the FCA, but only to a closed group of people. So if you are interested in that, come and speak to me. 22nd of April is the close date for that. On the 30th of May, we have our showcase on financial inclusion tech sprint, which is in Glasgow. So if you're up that way, please register for that as well. But definitely, if you're interested to hear more about what's gone through the Permanent Digital Sandbox, next week, 25th of April, Anzac Day for any Australians out there, and I'm told it's my boss's birthday as well. So yeah, please feel free to register for that and see what we've done.
And there are drinks.
And there will be drinks.
Perfect. Well, I think I would just like to then wrap up by saying a huge thank you to Madush and John for their opening remarks and setting the scene so wonderfully. And a massive thank you to my panel as well. It's been, as I say, I love this project. I love sandboxes. I find it so interesting getting to see the tech solutions come through, see how they're using the data, see how they interact with each other, the different tech companies, as well as with the market that they're trying to sort of sell into. And so I'm looking forward to the next 6 months, and do grab me afterwards if you'd like to find out more. But thank you all for listening.